All right. Hey, boys and girls, welcome to a review on adding and subtracting to solve one-step equations. So let's go right into it. It is just a review. I know we already know how to do this, but number 5 shows a minus 6 equals 13. So we're trying to get a by itself. That's what we're trying to do. That when it says solve an equation, it means to isolate the variable. To get a by itself, we have to do the opposite of what we were doing right here. Here we were subtracting 6. So we would add 6, but we have to add it to both sides, remember. When we add 6 to both sides, a minus 6 and a plus 6, those cancel out to give us a. 13 plus 6 is 19. A equals 19. Number 6. Negative 3 equals z minus 8. Now, don't freak out. I know the variable's on the right-hand side this time. That's okay. We just want to get it by itself. So we still do the same thing. Here we were subtracting an 8. Well, when we subtracted a 6 over here, we just added a 6 to both sides. Here we'll just add an 8 to both sides. This minus 8 plus 8 will cancel each other out, leaving us with just z. And here I have negative 3 and positive 8. Well, we've got to remember that rule. Different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the larger absolute value. So we'll subtract the numbers to get 5, and we'll keep it positive because there were more positives. Z equals 5 or 5 equals z. Your choice. A little artistic freedom there. Number 7. On number 7, it says negative 14 equals k plus 6. And I know you're not freaking out about this one because you got all your freaking out done on the previous one with the variable on the right-hand side. So now, here we're adding 6. Well, when we were subtracting, we added. Now that we're adding, we subtract. And we subtract 6 from both sides. Here, those cancel out, leaving us with just k. And here I have negative 14 minus 6, or negative 14 and a negative 6. Same sign, so I add and keep negative 20. Number 8. On number 8, x plus 4 equals negative 14. I'm adding 4 to my variable, so I have to subtract 4 to get rid of that. Those will cancel out, leaving me with just the variable. And here I've got two negatives getting put together, so I have more negatives, or negative 18 in this case. Number 9. Number 9 is c minus 7.6 equals negative 4. Wow, we've got a lot of rules going on here. We have to remember our one-step equation rules, our rational number rules, because we've got a decimal here, and our integer rule, remember, because we've got positives and negatives going on. It's a good thing you're in 7th grade. You probably couldn't handle this kind of thing in 6th grade. Well, we're subtracting 7.6, so what do we have to do? The opposite, which would be add 7.6, but we can't just add it to one side. We've got to add it to both sides. And when I add it over here, I'm remembering to line up my decimals. Now, these two cancel out, leaving me with just c equals, and now I've got to look here. I've got negative 4 and positive 7.6. Different signs subtract. But I can't subtract in the order that I have them here. When we do subtraction, we need our larger absolute value, or the number part of the bigger number part has to be on top. So I'm going to use this space over here to put 7.6 minus 4, lining up my decimals. There is no decimal here. Well, we remember if there's no decimal showing, it's at the end of the number. And now I don't have to annex a 0 here because I can do 6 minus a nothing here, but I sure like it to look nice. And it's a little easier to understand if I just put that 0 after the decimal. 6 take away 0 is 6. I bring the decimal straight down, and 7 minus 4 is 3. Well, now that I know that the number part is 3.6, I'll put that back over here. 3.6. And now I check to make sure if it's positive or negative. Was my bigger number part positive or negative? It was positive because 7.6 is greater than 4. Well, see how I used that whole line for that one problem. No big deal. There's more paper where that came from. Number 10. On number 10, it says negative 10 and 1/10 equals W plus 5 and 3/10. I subtract 5 and 3/10 from both sides. These cancel out, leave me with W. And now, these are both negative. Since they're the same sign, I'm going to add and keep them, which is why I lined up my decimals right away. So now I don't have to rewrite this one. I lined them up and we're adding. So 1 plus 3 is 4. Bring the decimal straight down. Negative 10, negative 5, negative 15. W equals negative 15 and 4/10. Number 11. I could maybe squeeze it in over here, but I'm not a big fan of squeezing problems in. I would rather just move down here. On number 11, I have 1/2. Yay, fractions. I love fractions. I love fractions because some people can't do them, and it makes me just feel so much smarter. Q plus 2/3. And after we work with them enough, you're going to feel confident with fractions too. Well, I'm adding something to my variable. So what do? I subtract that. So I'll subtract 2/3 from here. I subtract 2/3 from here. These cancel out, leaving me with Q. And now I've got this problem right here. I'm going to rewrite it over here so we can see it a little better. 1/2 minus 2/3. Well, I know that you remember we need common denominators. So I'm going to rewrite that problem. And with 3 and 2 as denominators, 6 is a good common denominator. Since I multiplied the 2 by 3 to get 6, I have to multiply the top by 3, and I get 3. Since I multiplied the 3 by 2 to get 6, I multiply the top by 2, and I get 4. So now this problem becomes 3/6, take away 4/6. Well, I know my answer is going to be in sixths because it's a common denominator, common straight through to the answer. And now I have 3 minus 4. And a lot of kids would put 1 there. But don't be fooled. It's a positive 3 and a negative 4. Different sign subtract, but keep the sign of the larger absolute value, which in this case is my negative. Negative 1/6. Q equals negative 1/6. And number 12. P minus 3 1/6 equals negative 2 1/2. Oh, what a lovely, lovely problem. Well, I'm subtracting, so I have to add 3 1/6, add 3 1/6. Now this left-hand side's easy enough. They cancel out and leave me with just P. But over here, I have negative 2 1/2 plus 3 1/6. I'm going to turn them into fractions, totally fractions. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5, so I have negative 5/2 plus 19/6. 6 would be a good common denominator. So the 19/6 gets to stay, 19/6. And here I have to multiply the bottom by 3 to make it a 6. So I multiply the top by 3 to get negative 15. Okay. Different signs. So I'm going to subtract. And 15 and 19, I subtract those. I get 4 over 6, of course. And I keep the sign of the larger, and the larger is my positive. So it stays positive. I can simplify this. 4 and 6, both divisible by 2 to give me 2 over 3. So my answer is positive 2/3. Positive because my positive number had the bigger absolute value. Number 13, G minus 9 equals negative 19. So I'll add 9 to both sides. Over here, those cancel out, leave me with just G equals different sign, so subtract and keep the sign of the larger absolute value, which would be the negative in this case. G equals negative 10. Number 14. On number 14, we have negative 9 3/10 equals D minus 3 4/10. So I was subtracting, so I'll add 3 4/10 to both sides. Add 3 4/10 to both sides. Bing, cancel, D equals. Now here I have different signs, so I'm going to subtract. But my larger absolute value is already on top, so that worked out well. I already lined up the decimals. I do have to borrow here. 13 minus 4 is 9. Bring the decimal down. 8 minus 3 is 5. And my larger absolute value was my negative. So negative 5 9/10. For number 15, 4 58 plus y equals 2 5/10. So here, it looks a little screwy, but I'm just adding those. So don't forget, when you're adding, you can just swap those around. 3 plus 4 and 4 plus 3 are equivalent, thanks to the commutative property of addition. So I could switch these around and rewrite it, but I don't need to. I can just subtract 4 58 from both sides. Leaves me with y over here. And now, different sign, so I'm going to subtract. But my larger absolute value is on the bottom. So I do have to rewrite this. 4 58 2 5/10. I'm going to annex a 0 here so they're even. And 8 minus 0 is 8. 5 minus 5 is 0. Bring the decimal down. 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 8/100. But don't forget, you keep the sign of whichever one had a larger absolute value, and in this case, it was the negative. So negative 2 8/100. Number 16. I have x minus 5 2/10 equals negative 18 73/100. I said I wasn't going to squeeze anything in, but boy, it almost looks like I am. I add 5 2/10 to both sides. Those cancel, leaving me with x. And over here, different signs, so I subtract. And thankfully, the larger absolute value is already on top. I will annex a 0 here, making those go to the hundredths place on either of them. 3 minus 0 is 3. 7 minus 2 is 5. Decimal comes down. 8 minus 5 is 3. 1 just comes down. And my larger number was my negative, my larger absolute value, that is. So my answer is x equals negative 13 53/100. And thankfully, I got to fit that in there. Number 17. Q plus 5/9 equals 1/6. So I'm going to subtract 5/9 from both sides. Leaving me with Q on the left-hand side. And now I have 1/6 minus 5/9. I need a common denominator. They actually both go into 18. So I'll make 18 our common denominator. And I multiplied 6 by 3 to get 18. 1 times 3 is just 3. 9 times 2 is 18. 10 times 2 is just 10. My denominator will be 18. And I have 3 and I have negative 10. Okay? Don't say 3 minus 10 is 7 because it's not. But 3 and negative 10, different sign, so subtract, but keep the sign of the larger. Negative 7/18. Negative 7/18. Number 18. And I have negative 2 1/4 equals R minus 5/4. I add 5, it wasn't 5/4, it was 4/5. Glad I caught that now and didn't get through this whole problem. 4/5. Too bad, I thought they were being nice and giving us common denominators. Add 4/5 to both sides. Add 4/5. Those cancel, leave me with R. And over here, I have different signs going on. I have a fraction and a mixed number going on. I've got uncommon denominators going on. I got all kinds of stuff going on. So we'll rewrite it down here like this. Negative 2 1/4 plus 4/5. I'm going to turn them both into fractions. That, of course, already is a fraction. 8 9/4, negative, of course, plus 4/5. A common denominator here would be 20. So here I multiplied 5 by 4 to get 20. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 equals 20. 9 times 5 is 45. And now we're ready. I've got negative 45/20 plus 16/20. Different signs, so I subtract those numbers to get 29 over 20. My larger of the two was my negative number, so negative 29/20. 20 goes into 29 one time with 9 left over. And of course, it will be negative. Negative 1 9/20. I'm going to go back up here and put negative 1 9/20. And I'll circle that one just because there's a lot going on right there. Number 19. W plus 3 3/8 equals 1 5/6. So I subtract 3 3/8. Leaves me with W equals, and now I got the same kind of thing going on with this problem. So I'll slide down here and I've got 1 5/6 minus 3 3/8. Making those both into fractions. I'm going to move horizontally this time. Making those both into fractions though. 6 plus 5, 11/6 minus 24, 25, 26, 27/8. Now I need a common denominator. I'm going to go with, they both go into 24. So we'll make them into 24ths. 6 times 4 is 24. 11 times 4 is 44. 8 times 3 is 24. 27 times 3 is 81. Okay, so now I can subtract, because I got different signs here. My denominator stays 24ths. 81 and 44, if I subtract those, I get 37. And it stays negative because my negative had the larger absolute value. Negative 37/24. And 24 goes into 37 one time with 13 left over. Negative 1 13/24. Negative 1 13/24. I'm going to circle that one again. It's kind of busy. Last problem that we're going to do, number 20. We got 4 2/5. Pencil change. 4 2/5 plus K equals negative 3 2/11. I have to subtract 4 2/5 from both sides. K equals, and again, I've got negative 3 2/11 minus 4 2/5. turning them both into fractions, going vertically this way. 33 plus 2 is 35 elevenths, negative of course, minus 22 fifths. What can 11 and 5 both go into? 55. Here I had to multiply 11 by 5 to get 55. 35 times 5 is 175. 5 times 11 is 55. 22 times 11 is 242. Now here, they're both negatives, so I get to add them and keep, add and keep, so I'm going to keep it negative. My denominator will be 55. 175 plus 242, it'll be a 7, then a 1 with a carry the 1, and a 4. 417 55ths, negative of course. And then 55 goes into 417 7 times. So negative 7 with 32 left over. Negative 7 and 32 55ths. Over here, negative 7 and 32 55ths. Excellent. Well, here's what I want you to do now that you've watched that review up through number 20. You can do the questions, and then tomorrow you'll just be doing journal page 56 again. Watch the video for that and do questions for that for the next day. For tomorrow. Awesome. Have a great night.